everyone. We're joined by Amit and Sajjad, who will be discussing the beginnings of Sparkster.
Good afternoon, pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon, it's a pleasure meeting you.
So, Amit, our history, we go back 11 years. That's a long time, right? Of which I think 10 years or more, you and I have been working directly with one another.
Yeah.
Right? Why are you still here, Amit?
So, the main reason I am still here because, we have challenges to face every day. We really try to solve the problem of individual, of the company. We try to find out the solution of every kind of possible problems, right?
So you're saying you're a guy that likes problems?
Absolutely,
And we haven't stopped giving them to you.
Yeah, and I like that, So, yeah, it's a kind of, we admire that. We run behind that, making impossible things possible. And that's the fun in the life.
And Amit is the guy that truly makes the impossible possible, him and his team. So to give you a brief history of kind of where we came from and how it is that we've spent 11 years working together, or 10 years working together very closely. We have built several businesses that still exist today that are online. They're e-commerce companies that sell products, manufacture products. We have factories that manufacture products around the world. And Amit started his journey with us, supporting those businesses. And over the course of the last 10 years, 11 years, he's helped us solve many problems in those companies and such. So Amit, why don't you speak about what that experience was like, especially before we actually embarked on the Sparkster project? Why don't you shed some light on what that was like and what that experience was like?
Back in 2007, we had a back office application which was supporting e-commerce application. And we started solving the problem of business people. And what happened, that as and when requirements were used to come from on-site to us, the understanding was very different than business people and developer. So requirement was A, and the entire development team was busy in developing B.
So why was that the case?
The issue was because one, definitely during that point in time we had an issue with communication. The communication at on-site and off-site were two different ways. And the second thing is lack of understanding about domain. Like the way we understand your domain and the way you guys handle domain is way beyond how we actually perceive. You know why? Because US, UK is far ahead than India.
Yeah. So just for clarity, for domain you mean the actual business itself, what business we're in, and how the business operates, and what the best practices are in that business.
True.
Right. So continue.
So it was always used to be a lack of understanding, and at the end, we were coming to conclusion that we completed everything what business people are expecting, and business people had nothing to deal with further. So then our CEO, Mr. Sajjad, Daya, he started interacting with us directly. So thankfully, I must say that, thankfully, there was no middleman after that. I was fortunate enough to start understanding the actual business requirement, and the way he explains the thing, it has started going inside that, okay, this is the business requirement we have, and what we are developing is absolutely crap.
What's interesting about that is that you had to learn about business and I had to learn about software, right? I had to learn about how you guys build and what the process is, and start understanding things like software architecture. And one thing that I realized as I learned more about software development was that what we were building from because we're business people and we need a piece of business software that solves a specific problem. Well, there were no requirements that we provided with regards to the architecture of that software. How many users should it support? How should it be accessible? Does it need to work on mobile? Well, in those days, mobile wasn't a big deal, but today it is, right? You know, what about security? What about user rights and user roles and, you know, all of those sorts of things. And so it became really apparent, you know, how many transactions can we handle per month, per year, whatever it might be, right? What really began to become apparent was that I needed to learn about software to be able to design business software to run our business. I mean, it was crazy, right? I'm trying to build a business, and here I am having to learn about software, right? And on your end, similarly so, right? I mean, you're a software guy, and you had to learn about our business, and I imagine that must have been, well, I'm sure interesting, but a bit of a challenge too.
Indeed, you know, indeed.
What was the most challenging part about learning business from a developer's point of view?
See, the biggest issue what we had was every kind of explanation we had to visualize, you know, because we were not on the spot. The requirements were told, but, you know, we had to visualize that, oh, this is how things has to happen. Yeah. And it was a big challenge, you know. I was fortunate enough to visit US, and then I understood many things. But it was very hard to explain the same thing to entire development team in India.
I think the real challenge is that software people are not business people. And so when we start describing business solutions, right, you know, we need something that validates if a transaction is fraudulent, right? We have multiple factories or multiple warehouses or facilities, and we need to route in, you know, we need to determine the best place to route an order based on how much inventory is in a particular location, right? Those basic things, you know, the basic concepts weren't understood by the software development team because they're just software developers. And one thing you touched on, Amit, is that India is far behind the West, and especially 10 years ago, right? It truly was really, really far behind the West. And so, you know, basic things weren't understood, right? And so the more that I began to dig into the way that things were being built, the more of a mess I discovered, you know? And ultimately, right, we ended up scrapping that platform that we had built, that piece of software that we'd built. And, you know, I learned at that point a significant amount about software development. And we built what we call V2 or version 2 of our platform. And version 2, you know, I picked up a book about service-orientated architecture. Luckily, it was written for business people. It wasn't written for technologists, so I could understand what it was talking about. And I began to learn about software architecture and how things can be built in a way that where code can be reused and components are centralized, so that, you know, if there's a change to a component, it's system-wide. You know, one thing I remember, Amit, that will make you laugh. Our concept of reusability in those days, right, was copying and pasting, right? We take a piece of code that does one thing, and our understanding of reusability was copy and paste. And just imagine what sort of problems that creates, right? If there's a problem in that one piece of code that you've written, you've now replicated that problem everywhere that you've used it. And the other problem here is that we don't actually, there's no way of keeping track of where did you copy and paste all this stuff. So now you've got problems or bugs popping up throughout your application all over the place, right? And so, you know, we almost depended on the software team to provide this sort of insight. We were you know, we're business people, right? So we're hiring software developers that, you know, we don't understand how to hire software developers. So they probably weren't the best. And that's when Amit came along, right? Inside of a big mess. And he comes to a platform, he comes to a piece of software that, you know, from what you hear, obviously sounds like it had a lot of problems, and it did. And it was causing, as you can imagine, this piece of software was causing a lot of business problems, right? So like I said, we began this journey of building version 2 of our platform. So why don't you talk about that? How did that take shape?
So, because of these so many problems around, Saj came to India, and we started spending time together in, really understanding the things, how it really works out. And he had a lot of patience, actually, I must admit that. He had a lot of patience in understanding the actual problem what we are facing through. And I don't know, perhaps we couldn't explain you well, I believe so. He just started picking up, whiteboard marker, and started writing on board that this is exactly what we want. And for a small definition, he started explaining in depth. And then we actually started realizing that, okay, hell, what we were doing so far, because then actual things were coming out in bits and pieces, and then we realized that now we are starting the program. Then we actually started talking about higher level stuff, When this inner level stuff were understood by us, then we actually started about the actual problems, that how can we really solve this? And then he came into picture.
One thing that happened on that trip in 2009 was that I began to draw flowcharts of how these business processes should run, right? Literally, it was boxes with descriptions in them and connected together to create a business process. So to give you an example, one might be where an order is received by our business, and we need to check, has this order been paid? Because sometimes orders come in that are not paid, right? And then, okay, if it's been paid, then we need to check, is there any reason to believe that this order was fraudulent? And then after that, we need to check, which of our facilities has inventory available for it, so that we can route that order to that particular facility so we can fulfill the order. So, what Amit is really describing is that what I did on that trip was that I illustrated on a whiteboard the step-by-step sequence of how the software needs to run. I was describing what the software needs to do. And what's interesting is, and we went into a lot of detail, right? We actually drew out the processes for how an order would be shopped around each of our facilities to see, if that facility had inventory. So it was quite an elaborate process. We were in that room for at least a week, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, at least.
At least a week, day in, day out, just drawing on a whiteboard. And it was the whole development team, right? We'd stopped development and we said, all right, let's plan this out the right way. What's interesting about that is I had a realization on that, in that experience. And that realization was that here I am describing what the software does on a whiteboard. I'm just drawing boxes and writing some text in them. And what I'm actually doing is I'm describing how software should be built. And just based on that diagram, the software developers can go away and actually build software. Now that was a remarkable insight, because that would be the precursor to something that would come much later on in Sparkster. And that would be that if you can describe it, we can build something that we'll build a platform that will automatically generate that code and will take out the software developer from that process. And I think that's important because then there's no misunderstanding. We don't end up in a position where there's one thing I understand and I am trying to communicate, and there's something else that the software developer understands, and then they go off and build something different. We can eliminate a lot of miscommunication. We can also increase the speed at which software is developed and deployed. We can solve so many problems in that, right? The reality is, even today, the language barrier that exists between the West and offshore software development facilities, whether it's India or whether it's Russia, China, Korea, or if it's near shore, to Europe, Poland or somewhere like that, there's still a language barrier. No matter what we do, there's a language barrier, right? I say one thing, someone's going to understand something else. And so what we're able to do, by autonomously generating software is actually solve that problem, right? You describe what you want in the same way that I was describing those business processes back in 2009, and the software can build itself. And I think that, we're very proud of what we've built in Sparkster. So let's continue the story. Let's continue this journey, Amit. So 2009, we built this, we designed these processes. What kind of followed? What happened next?
There are a couple of things, when he came in India in 2009, we realized that, okay, this is how software has to be built. But then we started building software. We integrated a couple of components based on a specific need of the moment. We had like fraud check, inventory check, order processing system, and all the requirements, though it was very well understood because of his visit in India. But then, there is one thing in this industry is that everything changes, right? Today we think that we freezed everything. Tomorrow we have an absolute right product which can be used by end customer. And very next week we realize that we need more enhancement of this application. So, though application was running very well, but new sort of requirements were keep on coming. And if you really figure out, we went back to zero. That in one visit we understood the requirement. We developed a great software. It was delivered to client. They started working on that. But again, new requirement started coming up. So issue went back to zero, that again someone has to understand the requirement thoroughly to build that. That means what? We came back to 2007 era where requirements are coming and nobody is really understanding the way it has to be implemented. So that that's what started hitting us very hard. Then what do we do next? What do we do next? We have everything in place, but we can't actually use. Then that was the time when we started talking about, what do we really do next?
Yeah. So it really became apparent that, what we need to do is, one thing that Amit touched on, he said that what was built was really specific to the needs of the business at that point in time. But the reality is that business is always changing. Your competitors are changing. Your competitive forces are always changing. Market dynamics are always changing. And hence your business is always changing. Around that time, many of us will remember, the Great Recession that ensued. And that caused problems for us and our business, and it was a significant challenge for us. And we responded by spawning a new business inside of our existing organization, and that was a photo business that manufactures photo gifts. Today that business is serving millions and millions of customers each year in many countries around the world. I think 19 countries today. We're at that point in time when we designed these processes, we were in an e-commerce sort of business, distributing products, right? We had warehouses that were distributing products to end customers. And the business requirements, obviously changed because we went from a distributor to a manufacturer. Whole different set of processes. So it was interesting that a lot of people at that point in time kind of got involved in designing their own processes that didn't have a holistic perspective of the whole business. And unfortunately, it took my involvement to come back and kind of redesign those processes for the photo business. But there was something to be learnt in that. And that was that you can build software, but that software will only be appropriate for a particular point in time. So think about that for a moment, right? If you're building software that can only be useful for a point in time, well, the software development life cycle, the time that it takes and the process in which software is built is long. I mean, it's not days, it's not weeks, it's months, sometimes it's years, right? So when this software is being built over a long period of time, you hear what the client wants, you understand what they want, then you write some documentation, then they sign off on that documentation to prove that you really understood what they wanted, then you go off and build it. This takes time, right? Now, while that's going on and the software is being built, right, the business is changing. So whatever gets delivered 6 months later, a year later, whatever it might be, it doesn't quite fit anymore because the business changed. So we actually struggled, because the process is the process, right? And so we were trying to turn out software as quickly as possible, but naturally what happens there, right? Things aren't designed well. When you try and speed up that process, the communication barrier causes an issue, the communication gap causes an issue, and the software that ultimately gets built and delivered isn't up to mark. It's not the same thing as what it was back in 2009. And so you're introducing challenges once again. So then, it became apparent, right, that if, thinking about those days from 2009, I was drawing the processes on the board. That process, that didn't end. I continued to draw processes on whiteboards, and software developers continued to build whatever I drew on a whiteboard. The epiphany began to emerge that actually the team just need to give me the tools, and people like me the tools, right? There's people, there's a litany of people in a company that know how things should be built or the best way that things should be designed. Speak to your director of purchasing. I'm sure that they could tell you the best process in which things should be bought in the company. But then ask them, is that how the software implements it today? Is that the actual process you're following? And what they'll tell you is no, it isn't. Right? Actually, we have to do this, that, and the other. That's different and really, isn't the most optimal way of doing things. So now turn that on its head, right? What the epiphany that I had at that point in time was, well, if I had the tools, right, I could just do this myself. In fact, I think I was quite frustrated, right? I think it was more along the lines of, give me the damn tools and I'll do it myself, right? And it's not their fault and it's nothing to do with them, right? It's just, this is just the way software is built. And people that are a part of this process, I think, will identify with what I'm saying. And that's what Sparkster really is, right? It's the realization of that dream and that vision. It's the result of that frustration, right? Had we not gone through those difficult times, we wouldn't be here today, right? So let's fast forward a little bit, Amit. Let's kind of talk about the beginning of Sparkster, right? Like, we understand why we went down the road of trying to figure out how to build these tools. And I'm sure you'll remember in those early days, it was just an idea. We didn't actually know how to build it, right? We didn't know how to make this come to life and become reality. Why don't you speak to that? What was that experience like for you?
See, one of the best thing is, sometimes I'm glad, those frustration came to you, because the result of a Sparkster is all about that, Just imagine if you guys wouldn't have faced such issues, you would have not even thought that we need a Sparkster. Yes. Yeah. So I'm very happy all the time for those failures, I enjoy those moments even now. Yeah. So, yeah, as he said that, we had solution, but actually it was not serving the actual processes, the problems what we had. And again, we both started talking, we started trying to find out really a better solution, like what do we do, how do we do. And I do remember that even though you read the book of service oriented architecture, we were walking in Washington DC street, still we were trying to figure out that, okay, now we have everything in the form of service, but still we need a developer to build that. How can we really come out with this, So now we know that processes can be built in the form of a small thing, but how do we really give this in the hand of business people? Because problem remains the same. right? So then we had a series of discussions regarding this issue, and somehow it clicked him that, you know, let me try to find out how software is actually built. He has started deep diving that. Okay, Amit, tell me, you know, what actually you guys are doing inside coding, because all the time you are saying technical issues, right? So I gave him whole lot of technical challenges, and he started, you know, catching one by one components in between and say, okay, if I have to build this component, what do we actually do? Then he was even trying to get inside that, okay, there is a for loop, if, you know, do while, you know, only few things which is actually making a component in life. Then he started thinking beyond how a developer can think of actually. He said, if we can facilitate the same thing in plain English language, which can actually transform the actual need what developers are doing. So idea started from there, you know, that let's give not only the tool, because before that the only idea was that let's give some tool in business people. But from that point in time he started thinking that not only tool, but let's also give some language which is very well understood by any kind of person, you know, even a layman can understand our English language. And then I think that was just the beginning, you know, it was just the beginning. We started thinking then, okay, now we have an idea, what do we do? How do we really proceed to next? And then I think you can add better than me that, you know, what actually happened to you? How did you realize that I can really make it happen? Because for me, he was saying that, Amit, we can make it happen, and I was like, how can you make it happen? We need developers, you know, we need database team, we need servers.
I want to take you back to something that, you know, I hope you remember. So when we first began talking about, you know, this idea of enabling people to build their own software, as far as I recall, it was something like 2011. And, you know, I came to India to kind of work through this with you, if you remember. And one of the things that happened on that trip was, you know, all we could see were technical problems. One that I remember particularly was the database, right? And given that that's your forte and that's, you know, your particular background, the question we had was, you know, we want an application that we can send millions of people to, but there's no database that exists that would be able to support that sort of activity. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So I was pretty adamant, I think. I was like, no, we're going to find a way, right? And, you know, that was one of many issues. So why don't you shed some light on that part of our history?
So see, there were many issues when they were talking back in the time. One of them was database for sure. And the issue what we had was, we were talking about millions of customers bringing on our platform. And then, you know, this centralized database system was one of the core issue where it can't handle volume of transaction. I mean, in no fashion it can handle a volume of transaction. Then the question was, what do we do? And yes, you are right, you were very adamant that, no, there must be a way to handle this. And the issue what we had was the, you know, making database distributable was more and more about, you know, manual sharding and stuff like that.
That's essentially what we discovered back then, right?
Yeah.
Was that the way to solve that problem at that point in time was to shard the database into multiple pieces in effect.
But that creates its own problem, you know. I won't get into deep level of problem what exists for that, but that has its own level of problem.
But that's just an example of one of the many problems, many hurdles that we faced when putting this application to, putting this platform together. You know, problems have existed at every tier, at every level. So what ensued from that was we decided to continue, right? We thought we would move forward. So really, I have a question for you, you know. Why did you give up? Why did you persevere and continue in the face of all of these technical problems? Why did you go along with what I was saying?
See, there are many easy ways in your life, you know. Basically, if you want to achieve something, you want to live happy, maybe you may choose an easy path to go get things done and be relaxed in your life. But then there is no fun of it, you know. What are you going to achieve in your life if you have nothing to, nothing to explore? And if many people are coming and talking, there are a lot of impossible things, and everybody is just talking, but there is no one who says that, no, let's make this happen. So I just need to include you as well, that we both had the similar mindset that, okay, if that's impossible, let's get it done. We will make it happen, you know. And we were so confident that we can make it happen, though we didn't have an idea how do we make this happen.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons that, you know, the challenges every moment we face, every moment we were receiving, it was actually, you know, thrilling me out that, no, I think I have something in my life, I can do much better, and I think we can do more for the, you know, industry where people are struggling a lot for such issues, and we are encountering, we have the solution, we can get the solution because we have a right attitude, right team, very right leadership, having lot of patience, describing things. And I'm sure you remember those days, even to get this solution, it just didn't happen in a day or two.
Yes, yes.
We had to speak each and every day, every tiny level of issues we were catching to the point, and we were drawing on board, drawing in Excel sheet, you know, to figure out where is the core issue to achieve, why people are calling it as an impossible. Let's make it possible.
Yeah, so you know, you're absolutely right. We decided to take on these problems head on, and we weren't fazed by them. You know, I think that's what we can say. We knew that there'd be problems, but we decided that this is something that we would, you know, persevere with. I know why I did it, right? I'm still wondering why you did it, Amit. But I can say something, right, that over the course of this journey, I think I've learned a lot about technology, and I've somewhat become a technology person. And similarly so, I think you've learned a lot about business, and you've become a business person.
That's right.
It's that marriage or that meeting where we understand each other from all aspects and all angles that has really had this be a very successful partnership between you and I for so long. Without that, we wouldn't be here today.
Completely agree.
There's been a lot of challenges, you know, over the course of the many years that we've spent trying to achieve this and trying to build this platform. The reality is that some people along the way lost faith. They lost sight of what we're trying to do and, you know, sought greener pastures, if you will. I recall that the large companies in the world really would come along and poach our team and, you know, offer them a lot more money and a nice, secure, safe job. And a lot of them would take it in the early days, right? Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, see, that was a very difficult moment, you know, if you really see in a different way that I was talking about this few minutes back. It's up to you how you want to choose your life. If you just want to pick up an easy life, you know, you come to office, have some regular job, do some, you know, code fixings and leave. But, you know, the kind of transformation we were talking about this product, you know, what we were thinking about this product was, we didn't have a solution, right? We are very clear that we had only problems in hand, we had no solution.
Yes.
So it can't happen. You just come to office, leave office, having no exercise. You have to pay attention. I mean, you have to pay attention to the core, like what issue we are talking about. First, you have to understand the issue. The issue what we have with a couple of guys, they didn't believe that when big companies are not doing this such job, why this small set of company can actually achieve, you know?
That's a good point, right? I mean, I've heard from many people, right? Well, if Google hasn't done it and Facebook hasn't done it, what makes you think you're going to do it?
Yeah.
And you know, it's It's a valid question, isn't it?
It's very hard to convince them.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that was a kind of another impossible situation for us. While we were talking about dealing with lot of impossible things, this was another impossible thing. But then they had to go. We tried our best to communicate, convince. They didn't live up with our dream. I'm very sure they must be regretting today. We do hear from a couple of our team members who are still connected with them, you know? But that's okay. So the bottom line is they didn't work with us. They didn't
believe, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that they couldn't believe that what we were trying to do, one, was even possible. And even if it was possible, that we could do it. Right? I think that was a challenge. And you know, those are very dark days, right? Those are very difficult times when your own team doesn't believe in you.
Yeah.
Right? I remember those days vividly. And I was quite disheartened, I must admit, when the team felt, you know, when the team, some of the team left. They were our best team members. They were offered a lot of money to go elsewhere and join, you know, biggest companies in the world, in effect. But we continued. We moved forward. We found new people. We built a new team. We continued forward.
Right, right.
What would you say the team think about our? I'm not sure that they really understand our journey, because this is probably the first time that we've documented it, right? And discussed it in a lot of detail. But certainly the vision, you know, they work directly with you on a daily basis. How do you think they feel about the vision? And you know, to elaborate, the team that we now have, you know, have been with us several years. 4 or 5 years is kind of the typical length of time that people have been with us. Some have been longer than that. Yeah. So why don't you elaborate?
So, you know, you must be surprised actually that even many set of current people, you know, they didn't believe us in the early days.
Oh yeah, I know.
So it was very hard. I mean, again, this was harder than again achieving another kind of impossible work. But you know, now I believe that, you know, a couple of them initially, they started dreaming like us. They started believing in us after, you know, working several hours together, several weeks, several hours together. They actually started believing in our work, what we do, because they started seeing their friends. I mean, I'm very sure about that. They started seeing what their friends are doing and what exactly they are into. They themselves started realizing that the work what we are trying to achieve is not at all a general work. Yeah. So that was one of the main reasons why they started believing us. And now today, I mean, we are very proud of our current team. They are associated with us for a longer time, but actually they believe us now. They have started trusting. And the best part now, the product is out. They are actually using application. Now they are the real Sparkster for us, you know, even before end user.
I think sometimes it's hard to see the wood from the trees. For a long time, you know, our application is very large. It's quite sparse in the sense that, you know, there are many components to what we've built. There's an entire system for managing security. There's an entire system for managing how the platform scales. There's an entire system for managing how things talk to one another when they don't know anything about each other. And you know, that's an example of some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So in the early days when our current team were building the things that they were building, things that we'd designed together, I would say that it was difficult to see the whole vision. They were doing the work that was assigned to them, which was a specific component of the platform. But to see the bigger vision and how all of that would come together to create something that we were talking about, enabling people to build applications without writing code, you know, I think that maybe is something that they didn't quite believe in yet. And really it took everybody, I mean, I would say it took the team to see it for them to believe it. Because, I think that we benefited from having a broad perspective, right? We knew what every team was working on, and we had a plan as to how all of those components would come together to facilitate, this higher level sort of application. This kind of emergent property of mixing all of these things together, taking all these disparate components, bringing them together would create this emergent property which would enable people to create applications without writing code. Another part of our journey that I want to elaborate on, Amit, I'm not sure if you remember this, but when we first planned on enabling people to build applications, and we first began talking about it, what we initially had the idea of doing was that we would build the components, right? Things like how to check inventory, and how to check fraud, and how to confirm if something was paid. And we would provide them an environment to be able to configure those components in whatever order they wanted to build higher level applications. I would say that initially our vision was something that was much smaller. It was, how do we enable business people to be able to build applications that solve their problems inside of a business, right? The way we had envisioned it is that they would go to some sort of a marketplace of all these components that we'd built, maybe other people had built and contributed to, and then they'd be able to compose those into applications, right? That was kind of the idea there. But I'm not sure if you know this, in 2011, I was in the States at that time. Some of the developers from our other businesses were visiting our facility there. Just listening to them and hanging out with them, I guess, right? One day it dawned upon me that application development comes down to a handful of concepts. When I first had this epiphany, I wasn't actually sure if that was true. So then I began to ask the developers, in all the stuff that you build, is it true that you've got if statements, loops, variable assignments, things like this, just a handful of concepts? And it began, developer after developer started to tell me, yes, it's true. I thought, it can't be that simple. It can't be that, what looks like this horribly complicated world where people are writing this gobbledygook on a screen, and nobody but a genius can read it. At least that's the impression I had, right? That all of that just boils down to like 5 concepts. And I thought to myself, if that were true, if that were really true, then anybody can build software. And all that we need to do is to take those fundamental principles, those fundamental concepts, and we need to make them accessible. Firstly, you shouldn't be having to write in a cryptic language that nobody understands, that you have to spend a long time learning this cryptic language. If you can talk about it and you can describe it in that way, then why can't you build applications in that way? But I wasn't sure that was true. When I first had this realization, I was like, no, it can't be. It can't be that simple, right? It's just can't be that simple. One of our developers from the office here in India was visiting us at that time in Florida. And so I spent a few weeks with him, locked away in a room. And this room has whiteboards all around it. And I would write something in plain English. And I would tell him, all right, give this to me in code. And then he'd write, and then vice versa. He'd write something in code and he'd describe it to me and I'd write it in plain English. And over time, I began to get confidence that, all software really just boils down to like 5 concepts. And that was remarkable. I mean, I was blown away. I was blown away at how simple software development actually is at its core. But it's made out to be so difficult. It looks so complicated. Like I said, it's just gobbledygook on the screen that, who even wants to learn that stuff? Now, when I look back on that and I think about, the stuff that even our developers today write because they have to build the actual platform, I just don't understand why it's so complicated. Why is it so cryptic? Once I was sure about this, I reached out to a professor at the local university, the University of Central Florida. His name is Professor Gary Levins. And we contracted Professor Levins to kind of work with us to solidify some of these ideas and help us with getting an understanding of the breadth of what we're really taking on here. Professor Levins is an expert in computer languages and has actually been involved in writing a few of them. And so I posed the question to him. I said, Professor Levins, is this even possible, right? I mean, is it possible to create, a whole new language and make it accessible, make it easy for people to use? I appreciated his honesty, and his honesty was that, look, if you're trying to replace Java or C# or JavaScript, well, you're barking up the wrong tree, because that's something that's evolved over a long period of time, and it's something that really cannot be done, according to him. And he said that, however, what has been done is that domain-specific languages, and I think I'm quoting him word for word, right? Domain-specific languages have been created. And so long as they're designed to solve a specific problem, those domain-specific languages have actually been very successful. I think that if we look at what we've done, I'd say that the domain that we focused on is business logic. And so we created a language that's just plain English. No semicolons, no syntax, nothing cryptic, plain English. These are blocks that you snap together. It was an idea that we saw MIT Scratch and we were inspired by MIT Scratch. We thought, if kids can grab these blocks and snap them together and control a character on a screen, what if we gave those tools to adults? And instead of adults building games, what if we enabled them to build full-blown software? What would that mean? What would the implications of that be? At that point in time, we hired a developer by the name of Manoa. And when he came to work for us, I assigned him this particular task. Let's find a way to be able to build this language that enables people to be able to build applications. And that's when really the language came into the picture. So we took these components and this architecture that the rest of the team were working on, right, to facilitate people being able to snap components together to design applications. And we enabled them to build those components using our language, which isn't just in plain English. What else would you elaborate on as part of our history, Amit?
There are many, because we have been trying to solve many problems than one. Just to elaborate what you just said, the idea of introducing plain English and parsing behind the scene was to simplify the whole process of software development. Because the core issue what we talked about this, but again I am reiterating that the core issue we had that business people were familiar with their need, but they didn't have a tool to interact with. They had to rely on software development. So while plain English came into picture to ensure that end user can work as per their need, or end user can actually define their business logic, business processes, we had another level of challenges after that. Okay, then how do we really connect them? Yeah, so we built a calculator function, let's for an example, but where do we use? What do we do with this? Then we started talking about, not only about integrating our core component, but we started talking about workflow system. And even workflow system we wanted to hand over in the hand of end user. And the idea behind this was, this should be as simple as plain English.
Yes, yes. I think that we can also thank Professor Levins for that insight. One thing that he also told me about was that the workflow system that we'd shown him then, he said that this is another language in itself. This is just a visual language. And that really got me thinking about workflow in a completely different way. So I think that, you know, we really have to thank Professor Levins for his contribution and for, you know, his guidance on our project.
Indeed. You know, we dealt another level of challenges as well, because we talked about in the past that we will have many integration components, like we can integrate with Salesforce, SAP, Facebook, Twitter. But then the idea was, you know, once we have integration, that integration can be used within the same platform. Until then again, you know, we completed one portion, but then again we started hunting developer that they have to come, and we are ready with our application, but we need to look for developer who can interact with Facebook.
Yeah.
So what we actually did is, codelessly we can integrate with almost every possible external parties, external software, and the same component can be used in the form of workflow or blocks, which is again in the form of plain English. End user or business people need not to worry about from where it is coming from, or if I have to talk to Salesforce, I need to learn a different process. If I have to interact with SAP, do I need to learn separate process? Or if I have to talk within our applications, do I really need to understand different language? So the intention was not to invite another level of complexity.
Yeah. I think that we really needed to, you know, when we really took this on, we discovered that we needed to invent a lot of things.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, we're the only platform that I know of in the world that enables you to integrate an API without writing any code. You know, we're the only platform I know of in the world that enables you to build, you know, software without writing any code. You know, so I mean, this is very true. We've had to solve a number of problems, and we've had to kind of scale up the number of problems that we're addressing so that we could solve the core problem that we're trying to address, which is how do we build applications without writing code?
Yep.
You know, but today we've done it.
Yeah.
Right.
And we mean it.
Yeah. Today we've done it, and it's a remarkable feat. It's a remarkable feat. Hearing our journey over the last, you know, however many years it's been. Hopefully you see that it's been a difficult road. It's been a road, I can say that there's only one reason that we achieved what we've achieved. And I think that that's perseverance. I think ours is a story of perseverance, right? That we kept moving ahead. No matter what, we kept moving ahead. Despite all the challenges and despite all the obstacles, people leaving us not knowing how to solve technological problems, you know, we moved ahead.
Yeah.
We pushed forward, we persevered, we found a way.
It's true.
Right? If it wasn't a simple way, then we had to find a more complicated solution to get from A to B. But nonetheless, we got there. And I think that comes down to one word, and it's just perseverance.
See, initially it was very hard for coming out from anyone's comfort zone, you know, because anything we look around, we always try to find out a solution within our comfort zone. And it was too easy, you know, finding solution was quite easy deal for us. But we had so much of experience, I mean, I must say that bad experiences, which I'm very proud of, by the way. Because of those bad experiences, we are here, right? But, you know, I mean, those were the moment we started thinking that we have to come out from our comfort zone. And if nobody wants to come out from comfort zone, the path was very easy to, you know, go and do whatever you have to do. Back then, when we started developing a Sparkster, we realized that, you know, every moment we are trying to find out an impossible thing. We never tried finding an easy solution for anything. So actually, it has started thrilling out. You know, because of these thrill, we started getting a lot of momentum. That okay, I think there is something new in our life. Let's live up with the moment. So more than you gave us problem, we started finding out problem. That okay, what else? You know what else? Because specifically you ask what does it mean, right? So it means that we had to explore a lot. We had to find out many impossible things which is keep on running that. Let's find out. Let's reach out to the solution.
I'll elaborate on what you're saying, Amit. Back in those days, you would present to me, this is what's possible from a technology perspective. But I think that you had the understanding, because I would tell you, well, find a way, right? We have to find another way. And actually, the way this worked, the way this process worked, it wasn't just me dictating how things should be. It was, we would spend hours and hours on the phone every single day architecting and designing how to solve the problems. This was a collaborative effort where we would actually design the components together over the phone. I was in the States and Amit was here in India. And we would design these sort of processes one by one, every component, whether it was security, whether it was the service-orientated architecture, whether it was, or whatever it was, all the components that exist in the platform today. And kind of that was the process, right? We would draw it, we would design it, the developers would build it. And I think the greatest problem that we had, what made this a very difficult feat and a challenging feat, was the fact that it needed to serve millions of people. This wasn't something that we would, build and you'd have your own copy and somebody else would have their own copy. And, we wanted this to be cloud scale. And that really means something specific, it means something very technical. And I think that was one of our greatest challenges. If something's going to be cloud scale, it tore up everything that we knew. And really in those days, cloud was really just developing, right? It was in its infancy. But if it was going to be cloud scale, then we really have to rethink everything that we know, and we have to kind of go back to the drawing board as if we know nothing. And it was a very complicated and very challenging problem, right? But here we are. Today, it's cloud scale. It's enterprise grade, right? And you can build applications without writing code.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad that, you remember each and every stages we have gone through.
Yeah.
Yeah, glad for that.
Amit, so 10 years we've been working together very closely. We've been speaking together on the phone every day, every weekday for 10 years. How has it been for you? How has it been for you?
I mean, I must say that I was fortunate enough working with you guys, The leadership of Sparkster is so strong, so powerful, so supportive, having lot of patience, So thank you for everything, Each and every day we were discussing about each topic, and I remember very well, more than agreement, it was disagreement. And it's very hard for a leadership to accept that, somebody's keep on disagreeing with their view. And it's you who were taking up as every disagreement as a new challenge to convince me. That motivated me, that means I have a flexibility to ask any sort of confusion, questions, what I have in my mind. I can move forward, ask questions. And the same culture we inherited in our team member. So in result, what happens, the thing which came up from top level has gone down to very junior level of employee. And then getting into more disagreement than agreement has actually allowed us to reach to this particular place. And that's very important. That's very important.
You bring up two things. So I should say, Amit, that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you and for your perseverance and for your leadership of the team. and the developers to make this a reality. We wouldn't be here if you didn't believe it was possible. If you weren't willing to grapple with the difficult topics that we were discussing, the technologically challenging topics that we were discussing. The other thing that, I want to touch on, right, is our culture. I would say that there's two important factors in our culture that have us be successful. One of the factors in our culture that has us be successful is that we encourage people to disagree with us. We encourage people to voice their concerns and debate with us. We don't have a mindset where what I say is right, or what Amit says is right. Quite the opposite. If I'm wrong, I want to know about it. I want you to come and tell me, because I'm going to be happy that we're able to have a constructive conversation about, is there a better way of doing this? We want you to disagree with us. We want you to go out there and, find, evidence or have contrary opinions to us. It's how we grow, and it's ultimately how, in the long run, we succeed. The other thing, it comes back to tenacity. It comes back to perseverance, right? This idea that we've ingrained in our team is that really the impossible is possible. And not only is the impossible possible, we make the impossible possible. We make the impossible possible. And how we do that, how we make the impossible possible, is strictly through and entirely through perseverance.
See, I must say that almost every day, everyone goes through a phases where they have some ideas, they have their own creativity, they want to do something in their life, but they are completely relying on the software developers, right? They might not be actual software developers, but their need can be fulfilled through software development, right? But what happens, if I have an idea, I want to do something, but then I have to look around. And then if you have to look around, you have to look for the cost, you have to look for, whether this application is really going to help. And if we deep dive, we'll be finding out it's not only about implementation, but then you have to deploy things, maintain them, accessibilities. A hell lot of new issues will come up. It's not easy. Being a developer, I can tell you that it's not easy for any business person. This software, Sparkster, allows you to come. If you have an idea, just in few minutes, you convert your idea into realization right there. And I personally believe that without guidance, you can make this happen. The Sparkster is self-equipped in guiding you that how do you make your application built. And you're there, you have an idea, you have a solution, right? And most importantly, your solution is not limited to the application itself. We have a concept of marketplace. You didn't touch that base.
This is a very good point. Yes, right? Yes, please do.
So you have an idea, convert that idea into realization, and if you feel that this particular idea can help to the society, publish to marketplace so that others can download and they can integrate in their application within our platform. That's very crucial. So we personally believe that this is going to change a complete cycle of software development.
Yeah. Agreed. It is going to change the way software is currently built, because ultimately what our platform is doing is democratizing access to software development. And it's making it possible so that everybody can build software. This is no longer the purview of the elite. It's no longer limited to people that understand and can speak this or can write this cryptic language that their computers understand. But I want to touch on this marketplace and why the marketplace is ultimately, one of the things that's truly empowering. If you have a great idea that's meaningful and contributes value, you can publish it to our marketplace, sell it on our marketplace, and earn an income from your ideas. You know, I think that this is one of the few places in the world, one of the few places in the world where you can sell ideas rather than sell effort. This is one of the realizations I think we've had from our platform, is that what it really means to the world is that our platform enables people to conjure up an idea, build it easily without having to learn anything, without needing to engage a team of developers or whatever it might be, and then find a group of people to support your project, to help you with your project, to pay you for the use of your project as customers. What we enable you to do with our marketplace is earn an income from your ideas. I think that that's powerful. I think that that's liberating. I think that changes the world. It certainly changes people's world. You know, I spoke earlier today separately about how here in India I see people pushing vegetable carts around, and how someone could, a local person here, could come and use our platform, build an app that enables people to order vegetables and have them delivered by these local cart sellers, cart vegetable sellers, within minutes to their door, right? Solves a problem for them. They don't need to go out. Traffic here in India is horrendous. It's a big challenge. But think about that, right? The person that creates that app generates an income from every sale potentially that occurs through that app. It changes that person's life. It changes that person's life. But even the people who are receiving those orders, the vegetable cart salespeople who are receiving those orders, it puts money in their pocket. You know, these are potentially some of the poorest people in the world. Any final words that you want to share with the viewers of this video, Amit?
Sure. I must add one thing to our viewers, that please join us an end user and become a Sparkster. And we are very sure that you are going to love your creativity, you are going to love your ideas, because you are going to see into real form what you had been keep on carrying in your life throughout. And we are pretty sure about that when we say this. You become the Sparkster. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for, if you're still with us, thank you for staying with us. Hopefully you see how meaningful this platform is to us, and how important it has been, to our lives. It's been a decade of work and a decade of perseverance. But in this journey and along this road of building this product, I have had the distinct honor and the distinct pleasure of working with Amit. And
same here. I'm glad.
I can say that today Amit is a brother to me.
Thank you. I'm actually honored. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Amit. It's the truth.
It means a lot. It means a lot.
So, it's not just about the product, but it's also about the people that we've come to know, and how our family has extended as a result of this product. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.